They keep telling us that they want aid.
And this is what's left of it.
Why only in America?
People want their country to work.
Just want a job in a normal life.
Why are these homes empty?
I want you to be honest with people.
That has happened within minutes.
Sky News, the full story first. Free wherever you get your news.
Hello there, you're watching the press preview, a first look at what's on the front pages as they arrive. It's time to see what's making the headlines with The Guardian columnist Zoe Williams and PR consultant Alex Dean. They'll be with us from now until just before midnight. Welcome both. Thank you. So let's see what is on some of those front pages. Well, the Belfast Telegraph describes Alexander McCartney as the very worst sexual deviant. He was jailed for life today after mounting a huge campaign of online blackmail against children, which led a 12-year-old American girl and her father to take their own lives. The Times reports that Rachel Reeves will increase employers' national insurance by up to 2 percentage points in next week's budget as she seeks to fund the NHS and balance the books. The Daily Telegraph also leads on this and claims the government is watering down one of its key manifesto pledges. The Eye reports that Rachel Reeves is facing a growing backlash from her own party over tax plans for working people. While the Express says an exclusive says Labour has been warned that pensioners need a guarantee that they will not miss out on fuel payments due to pension credit delays. The Mail takes exception to Sir Keir Starmer, suggesting that owners of shares and assets do not fall under his definition of working people, calling his remarks an insult to Middle Britain. The FT hears that EU governments are drawing up contingency plans for how to adjust their relationship with America if Donald Trump becomes president again. And the Sun's columnist Jeremy Clarkson bemoans his recent health problems, insisting they mean he can no longer have any fun. The Mirror leads with a story from the Pride of Britain Awards. Their headline, "Everyone Needs a Florrie in Their Life." The 8-year-old award winner pictured there with Michael Sheen. And the Star pictures the former leader singer of The Jam, Paul Weller, alongside a real-life doppelganger. Kind of. And a reminder that by scanning the QR code you'll see on screen during the programme, you can check out the front pages of tomorrow's papers while you watch us. And we are joined tonight by Zoe Williams and Alex Dean. Thank you both so much for being with us. OK, let's start with the story, which is in lots of the papers, and we've been leading with it. But let's look at the Belfast Telegraph. And that is, of course, the catfish story. And here, basically a case of an abuser in Northern Ireland that actually causes the death of a child and her father in the United States. It really puts a spotlight on catfishing, what it is and how damaging it could be. A shocking story.
It does, and I think the Belfast Telegraph get it absolutely right. Some people, if they're just cursorily scanning other headlines, might think to themselves, gosh, catfishing, pretending to be someone else online, quite how bad can it be? Exceptionally bad is the answer. And so when I was practising as a barrister, I saw murderers get minimum sentences, tariffs on their life sentence of 15 years, 17 years. This guy was sentenced to a minimum tariff of 20 years. And some people might have thought, why would he get more than a murderer? The answer is that in the 185 offences he's pleaded guilty to, some 3,500 victims around the world have been affected by him worming his way into their lives, pretending to be someone else, and then blackmailing them for sexual images of themselves or their younger siblings, or both. And he simply did not care about what happened to his victims. And we know that for a fact because he told them so, and their conversations were recorded in material that was subsequently discovered. That up to and including the girl who killed herself. Yeah. He said, I don't care what happens to you.
I think also in court he was described as utterly remorseless about the whole thing. I mean, there's so many layers of the story which make it so tragic, but the fact that the father killed himself, I think about a year and a half after his 12-year-old daughter killed herself, just shows how helpless a lot of parents must feel.
Yeah, I mean, and absolutely devastated. I think we often, it takes a case like this before we open up a conversation about online safety for teenagers. I think a lot of what's all prepubescence, yeah. A lot of what's missing from that conversation is what I think is axiomatic, that they have to know that nothing they can do is so bad that it can't be fixed. And that is, and you know, so we talk about how serious it can be, never talk to somebody you don't know, always be mindful that they could say they're one thing and they could be another thing, never get too far down this path. And I think kids experience that as not as guardrails, but as a huge amount of things they could do wrong. And so then when they get into a kind of online relationship that suddenly they're being exploited, they feel very, very isolated and they feel like the stakes are unbelievably high. So I really think if I were going to see a public information campaign for teenagers, it would be along the lines of, yes, stay away from all those people. Yes, be mindful that people are deceitful. But mainly, nothing you do could be that bad. There's nothing worth losing a night's sleep over, let alone taking your life over.
That's absolutely right. And to make the point, the father of that little girl who took her own life killed himself a year and a bit after she took her life. But they only found out it was because of what this man had done 3 years after she killed herself. That is to say, that father went to his grave never knowing why his girl had killed herself. And that was part of the reason that he couldn't go on. And so it was the count back. They discovered this man's cache of material and counted back, had to get in touch with the family to say, this is why your granddaughter, in that example, killed herself.
Yeah. Oh, my gosh. Awful story. And has to be said, a lot of adults, of course, get...
Of course.
Catfishing, so imagine just how much more vulnerable children are. Let's take a look at some of the other stories. Let's go to The Times. Obviously, a lot of speculation about the budget, which we're going to find out the details of this week. This particular story in The Times is about national insurance. Zoe.
So this is actually one of the least bad attacks on the government, which is extraordinary because this goes in quite hard. It goes in quite studs first, and it basically says it's an attack on employers. Now, it's A, the least bad attack, and B, the least big surprise, because Rachel Reeves never ruled out hiking national insurance on the employer side. She just ruled out hiking it on the employee side. So this is the bit that most people will have been expecting, and there's still a huge amount of opposition even to that. But, you know, this is also opening up the story which the other papers go larger on, which is that the tax... There's been a comms error, essentially. Keir Starmer has said that people who own, landlords and people who own shares aren't working people. Yeah. That landlords were so fast out of the bat, it was untrue on social media, saying, actually, we are working people. Yeah. What he meant was... I mean, what I would have told him to say was, these aren't taxes on income, these are taxes on assets. And that is the distinction that the budget's clearly gone in on.
It's such a clumsy phrase, isn't it?
Well, it's so clumsy, and it just makes them look like you're not real people, I'm not governing for you.
Yeah, you're not really working people.
Yeah, which is daft, because you can make loads of economists make the case that you should be taxing assets wealth rather than income, and if you put all the taxes on income, then you end up with people who are grafting really bearing the brunt. And wealth is taxed relatively low compared to income.
So Alex, before coming to you, can I just pull up some of the other front pages? So let's look at the Eye, and they mention what you were talking about, Zoe, basically this whole discussion around working people, and it came from an interview with our political editor, Beth Rigby, and also in the Daily Mail. Starmer's insult to Middle Britain, again being accused of plotting a class war against Middle Britain.
It's definitely something that affects working people for the following reasons. The first is that if you increase the tax on when you have employees, which is what they're doing to businesses, you will have fewer employees. It's the nature of what happens with taxation, in the same way if you tax consumption more than people consume that product less. If you have to pay more rate of national insurance as an employer, net across the country, fewer people will think about taking on new employees than they would have done before. But secondly, because the markets are so concerned about what the government is doing, the rate on gilts is going up, and people get confused about it. It's pretty straightforward. A gilt is a bond. It's me saying, I want you to buy my debt, and here's what I'll pay you back in 10 years' time, 30 years' time. The rate I will pay you back is going up because people are concerned about what the government's plans are. That means that interest rates will stay higher for longer. It means people will pay more on their mortgages. And, of course, the people who are owners of assets or investments very often have those things in their pensions. They have those things in investment plans because they've saved from their taxed income. It is plainly a tax on workers, which is what they said they wouldn't do to begin with. The problem is, it's not just bad. I agree with you that it's bad comms. The problem is the commitment they made not to tax working people when they went into the election, which plainly just isn't true.
Well, I mean, I actually agree with that. I think there was no need for... there was no need for them to commit in that way to not raising taxes. You know, they didn't have the same constraints on them as an electoral force because everybody was going to vote for them anyway. But having done that, they didn't need to make the category so loose.
Yeah.
You know, it's
that's right.
Even Tony Blair, when he promised to stick to Tory spending promises, he was very, very clear.
Yeah, for the first term.
For the first term, and these are the promises I'll stick to. But he never said, I'm not going to do anything.
But they would say, I guess the government would say that they found the sort of, you know, black hole of 20+ billion pounds and they have to compensate for that.
So that doesn't work for at least two reasons. The first is the OBR exists now and shows you what it's in the books. But the second is that Reeves has telegraphed that she's going to alter what the government considers to be debt or the rules constraining debt so she can borrow more than that black hole. So that doesn't require these other activities on tax. The trouble is nobody goes into an election saying, we're not going to tax working people, with the electorate then thinking to themselves, well, what do working people mean? Well, what I meant by working people is, or we're not going to raise national insurance. People vote. What I meant by national insurance is, you know, so people really, I think, feel they're being sold a pup.
OK. Zoe, Alex, we're going to leave it there for now. Stay with us. Coming up, EU countries are making contingency plans for how they'll deal with America if Donald Trump becomes president again. We'll discuss that next.
All right, ready?
Not really.
We've heard it could be painful.
A bit more pain now. Free up more money to spend.
But will it be as the government claims?
Ow! The pain now is just too much to bear.
Temporary pain for long-term gain.
Right, all done.
Not bad, actually.
The budget, the full story, first on Sky News.
I'm David Blevins, and I'm Sky's senior Ireland correspondent.
It takes 60 minutes to cross the Irish Sea. It took the British monarchy a century.
I've spent 30 years reporting the journey from conflict to peace.
The political parties of Northern Ireland have reached agreement.
If there's anyone who might know how to fix Northern Ireland's devolved government, it's the American architect.
Changes in circumstance require changes in approach.
The end of the political stalemate, the start of a new chapter for Northern Ireland.
I confirmed that I am willing to take up the office of First Minister. My election to the post of First Minister demonstrates the change that's happening on this island.
Catholics and Protestants on different sides, now facing the same threat.
If we both contract COVID-19 and end up in hospital, religion's nothing.
People here are adept at finding hope amid adversity. That's the spirit of a place that punches way above its weight.
We help you understand the world with us. A toxic blue-green algae now poisoning Lough Neagh. It's breaking your heart what has happened here.
It is.
This is a vital resource, a national treasure, now fighting for its very life. They are effectively surrounded by Northern Ireland, and that makes this the most unlikely of international frontiers.
If there's a hard border, I think it'll cripple the country.
Winter is coming. Welcome to Winterfell. It's an iconic location in this globally acclaimed drama. Ophelia was the most powerful hurricane this far east in the Atlantic on record.
Sky News, the full story first.
I say, bring it on.
With America divided and tensions running high, get ready for an election like no other.
Join our teams as we follow the campaign trail as America decides.
We will win, win, win.
Get closer to the action this US election with full reaction and analysis.
Sky News, the full story first.
There's always more to the news than a headline. We want to discover, to delve a little deeper, to find out what's really going on. Explanation, analysis, the people at the heart of every story. I'm Neil Patterson, and this is the Sky News Daily Podcast. So, by the end, we'll hopefully all understand what's going on in the world just that little better. Available wherever you get your podcasts.
Welcome back. You're watching the press preview with me now, Zoe Williams and Alex Dean. Okay, let's go straight to the Financial Times. Front of the weekend section, EU braced for possible Trump win. So obviously the EU was a bit surprised, weren't many of us back in 2016 when Trump won the election. They don't want to be this surprised anymore. Alex, what are they trying to do to avoid that?
There's two elements. The first is in policy, where the European Union is most concerned about trade tariffs under President Trump. I mean, with President Biden's IRA, it's hardly been plain sailing anyway. But the two significant blocs have been in communication. They disagree about some things, but nothing like the kind of rift they might have with Trump. That's part one, trade tariffs and so forth, policy areas. Part two is on the personal and how people will have to unwind remarks they've made in the past if Donald Trump becomes president again.
Ones?
Well, the worst is actually not in the European Union. The worst is our own David Lammy, who called President Trump a neo-Nazi sympathising sociopath, who referred to him as a dangerous clown. These are all separate times. A dangerous clown. And then he called him a racist KKK sympathising Nazi sympathiser. That was when he was trying to oppose Donald Trump's visit to the United Kingdom. Yeah, that's now our Foreign Secretary.
But so, Alex,
yeah.
I take your point, but that is not what the EU... Nowhere in this story does it say the EU is preparing to unwind their difficult remarks.
Those are...
It's like
the officials...
You are literally shoehorning in David Lammy's...
No, I'm not. I'm talking about the two sides of preparation you have to make were a Trump presidency to come about. The first is on the trade tariffs and things like that, and that is where the United States should be... the European Union should be most concerned in policy terms. But, of course, deep rifts and differences over issues like support for Ukraine and support for... potentially support for NATO, too. But when officials talk about deep trouble, they don't just mean about those policy areas.
The thing is, I do feel for the EU because they pride themselves on contingency planning. That's their thing. They are the contingency planning guys. And it's not really possible to contingency plan for a Trump win, partly for the reasons you say, that there are so many cross-currents between foreign policy, trade policy. Ukraine is so huge. His orientation towards the warring parties in the Middle East seems to change every 5 minutes. He's a wild card. But furthermore, you cannot contingency plan around a person who's completely unpredictable.
Let me just bring a quote that Charles Michel, he's the European Council president. Now, he said if Trump wins, it would be an additional wake-up call that we need to act more to take our destiny into our own hands.
But what does he mean by that, though?
I think that's about potential loss of US leadership in NATO, loss of US support for Ukraine, the largest country wholly in Europe, invaded utterly unjustifiably by its bullying neighbour to the east. There are genuine and significant points to be made there. But I think, to your point, and I'm not disagreeing that he's unpredictable, his unpredictability is one of the things many of his supporters see as a virtue. They see as a quality in him.
Yeah. But you can't... But, whether or not it's really, really pleasing to the MAGA 47% to see somebody who makes things literally incoherent one day and changes his mind the next, doesn't make that any easier for kind of, really broadly speaking, quite technical officials in the EU.
We've got 60 seconds for the last story, Times World, and that is the stars coming out for Kamala Harris. First Bruce Springsteen, Beyonce, but maybe even Taylor Swift. Zoe, does it matter to have these stars come out?
My heart sank a tiny little bit when I saw this story because I remember in the 2016 election, Beyonce doing her first endorsement of Hillary, and she was sitting with a number of other stars, including Springsteen, in a rally, and it just looked... it just gave me the chills, even before Trump had won, because there was something about it that looked like they thought it was such a done deal. A little bit like Remain,
reinforces the view of the people most likely to vote for Trump that the Hollywood elites and the West Coast establishment's all against them. I'm not sure it helps.
But also, I don't know how much Kid Rock helps Donald Trump.
I'm not sure how much Hulk Hogan does either, but I mean, I think celebrity endorsements are not greatly helpful either way, but sometimes your opponents can use them.
Alex Dean, Zoe Williams, we're going to have to leave it there. Thank you both so much. Now, coming up next on Sky News at 11, a prolific online abuser known as a catfish has been jailed for a horrific campaign which led to the death of a 12-year-old.
We've got your Sunday mornings covered. From the front page and the sounds of the streets to the voices of the people who make the major calls and big picture politics beyond Westminster. We'll put you at the heart of our story. A new start to Sunday.
I'm ready. Are you?